PlayStation has officially turned 30. Yes, it's celebrating an anniversary, and I figured this was a good time to talk about it. Because one of the things here I like to do on this channel is go on record about some things I haven't talked about really directly in my, like 10-year history of talking about games and stuff like that. Also, I just like talking about stuff I like and stuff I find interesting. So this video is going to be a little personal, yes, but I figured it was good to put out there my whole experience with PlayStation, because I've been around from the beginning. I'm sure some of you guys definitely have fond memories with some of the older consoles, so I'm looking forward to hearing yours. But here's mine. The PlayStation 1. That's where it all started for me. Well, it didn't really. I've talked about this in the past. I had a Nintendo, an NES, in the early 90s, so I had that. But the PlayStation was my first exposure to 3D games, gaming in the third dimension, so to speak. The PS1 released December 3rd, 1994 in Japan, but for North America, where I'm at, it was September 1995. Now, my memory does get a little bit fuzzy. I definitely didn't get it right away at release date or anything, but I probably got it around 1997 because I remember the first time I saw a PlayStation. I saw it at a kiosk at a Toys R Us store, and I remember seeing on the screen the Lost World Jurassic Park, playing as a T-Rex, letting you just like chomp on humans as they're shooting at you and trying to get you. You're just stomping on them and chewing on them, and I was immediately like, whatever this is, I need it. Think about that, like as like a 6-7-year-old boy, like I was locked in for that shit. So eventually, for like I believe a Christmas or something like that, I got my hands on one, and I remember playing things like the Lost World Jurassic Park, eventually Croc, Blasto, Jet Moto, Crash Bandicoot 2. Warped was funny because I had played that, and that to me was Crash Bandicoot. Then eventually I went over a friend's house, and he only had the original Crash Bandicoot, and the jump from Crash 1 to Crash 2 is so big. Like, Crash got like rizzed up for the second game, so I was like, this Crash sucks, mine is better. But I actually had a really hard time adjusting to 3D gaming, platforming in 3D and stuff like that. And I really, really struggled. It took me a while to really get good at it, and I was frustrated. And I remember my parents actually like taking the console and having some fun themselves and inviting friends over and playing Jet Moto. And I would hear them having literal Jet Moto parties while I was trying to go to sleep. Thanks, Mom. I was still really into it. And then at one point, somebody brought home Resident Evil, and that was huge for me. And then inevitably, eventually, Metal Gear Solid. And I've talked about that a million times, but that original console, like I just feel like I really got a lot of juice out of it. There were a lot of games, a lot of weird games, like weird vague memories of like busted games that like I couldn't even tell you today what there are. There were a lot of really interesting titles on that thing back in the day, and this console itself was just sturdy, awesome, just a brick shithouse. I don't know, that boring, simple gray really hits. I mean, look, everybody wanted that PlayStation 30th anniversary PS5, right? That was the look. I could go on and on talking about all the games, like Rebel Assault 2, Jedi Power Battles, a lot of things I have fond memories with, breaking the console and the games with like Game Shark and stuff like that. But to move on for the sake of like covering all the things, next up was PlayStation 2. This released October 2000, and by this point, I was like capital G gamer, hooked in, clued into all the video game magazines and poring over them and obsessing over them. So I was ready to jump in pretty close to launch for this one. Not day one, but I had to like work and save. I was, as like a 10-year-old kid or whatever, I was like on my grind set hard. I was mowing lawns. I was saving money. I was selling whatever I could just to get one of these goddamn things. And I finally got enough money, I scored enough cash to go to the store and buy one, and I got the Gran Turismo 3 bundle. It came in the red box, and I was just so happy. It was the best thing ever. But I didn't have enough money for anything else, so all I had for like, the first couple of months or so was like Gran Turismo 3 and no memory card. So I couldn't even really save my progress, so I was just forced to play Gran Turismo with the shitty starting cars like a little Mazda or like a PT Cruiser, and that was my life. But I had so much fun because I was happy that I finally got that console. And the big thing for that, of course, was Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear Solid 2 was my everything. It was all I thought about for a long time. I had it pre-ordered. It was like one of the first games I really committed to pre-ordering. And yeah, it finally released and it was awesome. But there were so many things on PS2, right? The original Devil May Cry blew me away. Obsessed with that. Eventually, Shadow of the Colossus, of course. There's so many mainstays, right? Like I could just rattle them all off, but like I think for me, PlayStation 2 was the one I got the most out of. I think it had the most compelling games. I had it probably for the longest period of time because I got it pretty close to launch, and it was just a joy. I even bought that stupid little blue plastic vertical stand to have it stand up straight, which is funny because now PlayStation is still doing that. They're still selling those vertical stands, but that thing was freaking awesome though. Like the fact that like you could play music on it, you could watch DVDs on it. You really felt like you could conquer the world with a PS2. I felt like an adult when I had one. That of course kicked off kind of like the open world, like love fest with like Grand Theft Auto 3 and being around for that, and Grand Theft Auto 3 getting on the news because it was violent and it let you like murder civilians and stuff like that. That was a whole big thing, but also playing a lot more fighting games that were transitioning to full 3D. I remember being really obsessed with like Mortal Kombat, Deadly Alliance, Soul Calibur 2, stuff like that. The PlayStation 2 still to this day is my favorite. I think it was like right time, right place because I wasn't super young, I wasn't super old. I was at that right time where I could just dump my entire life into so many games and just make so many games my literal identity because I had nothing else. So yeah. PS3 is where things kind of change, right? Because I had jumped onto the Xbox 360 bandwagon. I had become pretty Halo pilled during the PS2 era. I had also gotten an Xbox at some point and a GameCube. I was a very broke child. I was constantly wheeling and dealing and scheming and selling things to get these goddamn consoles. But yeah, for a while I had an Xbox until I eventually sold that. But Halo was a thing. So with Xbox 360, I was pretty into Xbox and like what they were doing, so I jumped in. And of course, for good measure, the Xbox 360 was an incredible console, a lot of awesome games, but it also meant that I had to choose wisely, and I didn't get my hands on a PS3 for a while. The PS3 launched November 11th, 2006, and that thing was expensive. Almost it felt like prohibitively expensive. I had only known one person, my closest friend Andrew, who had gotten one, and he got it because his stepdad like bought it out of some guy's trunk at 7-Eleven or like a gas station or something like that. So I was able to be exposed to the console because my best friend had one. I got to see Resistance, I got to see a lot of those launch titles. But for me personally, I didn't actually get my hands on a PS3 until way later, once it had like a slim revision or two. In the meantime though, I was bumming one off of my friend and borrowing his here and there when I could. And at one point, I was like, dating a girl, and I kind of like hung out with her a lot so she had a PS3 and I needed to play Metal Gear Solid 4 one way or another. Do you know what it was like to be a diehard Metal Gear Solid fan and Metal Gear Solid 4 releasing, which is like the Avengers Endgame of Metal Gear games, and not having a PS3 to access it or play it? You couldn't just like watch the whole thing on YouTube really back then, or maybe you could, I don't know, but I needed to play it. And so I had a girlfriend that had a PS3, and maybe I like the PS3 more than her. But hey, either way, I got to play Metal Gear Solid 4, and then eventually, like towards the end of the console's life cycle, I finally got my hands on the thing itself, and it was great to have some catching up to do. I had a lot of titles I had to catch up on, but it was so worth it. And at this point, it was when I was starting to talk about video games online a little bit. Mostly for fun, obviously not for a job, but just throwing videos out there because I had no one else to really talk about these games with other than like two of my close friends. I was really just kind of alone. So I started making videos to talk about games and just get it out there and find other people like me. I remember playing Skyrim on PS3 when that launched, and it was an absolute mess. I remember Uncharted 3, being so excited for that. They had like a launch event in New York City. I remember going to that and like meeting some of the developers and like being so excited for the game and stuff. And even though it launched in an expensive manner, and yes, for many developers, it was hard to make games for it. All that being said, like looking back at the PS3, it had some awesome fucking games. And I'm really happy I was able to finally get one, even towards the end of the life cycle, and really kind of catch up on everything. The Infamous games, the Killzone games, a lot of heavy hitters on there. But then, of course, there was the PS4. The PS4 launched November 15th, 2013, and it was fun to be there. There was like a New York City PS4 like game reviewer like press event, and I wasn't invited, but my friend was, and he hired me to be his camera person. So I technically kind of like weaseled my way into the PS4 press launch event, and that was really cool. Especially like me just trying to get my foot in the door in this industry, in this career. That was just a wild ride. So I've been at this for a minute, and I remember when the PS4 did launch, it felt like it was a slow start. It kind of feels a little bit more like today, like a little bit more of a modern console launch, right? Where it had some games, but like that Killzone that it launched with did not really, burn anyone's doors down or anything like that. I remember with PS4 at launch or near launch, spending the most time with Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Black Flag was also available on PS3, but it looked a little better on PS4, and I played the shit out of that game and 100%ed it. So that's like one of my earliest PS4 memories. But PS4, I mean, like, it's a great console. Like, looking back at it now, it had some long legs to it. There was a reason why, like, right up until pretty recently, a lot of developers were still putting games on PS4 as well as PS5 because of the install base. And yeah, from a hardware perspective, like, I don't have as much like love for it or anything like that. The controller, a great design, really enjoyed that. The touchpad, still not really used as much as it should be. But, the way the console looked, and also the console UI, nothing real. I don't have maybe it's because it's more recent, but I don't have too much nostalgia for it. It just didn't feel as like interesting or creative as it used to be, as the PS3 interface, the PS2 interface, stuff like that. But otherwise, a solid console. For me personally, at this point, I was like heavily a multi-platform gamer and also playing games on PC, so I was already all over the place, but I still look back fondly at the PS4. The PS5, like, they let you for the 30th anniversary, like, add old sound effects and stuff in the menus, and even just going back to the PS4 menus, I was like, wow, I spent a lot of time hearing these damn sounds, they're like drilled into your brain. But yeah, that's generally my history with PlayStation. I wanted to put it on paper, get it on the record here, just in case anybody thinks that I'm an Xbox fanboy or a PC fanboy or whatever. I definitely have the most love for PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 by a mile. PlayStation 3, obviously, I came a little late, but a lot of good stuff there. Then PS4, sure. But it was really the original PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2 pipeline that was like, what a time to be a player. I am still chasing that high to this day, if you couldn't tell. But I've yapped enough today about PlayStation and stuff like that. So like I said at the start, I definitely want to know what you guys think. Your history with this console franchise, whatever the fuck you want to call it, with Sony, with PlayStation. When did you jump in? I'd love to hear it. If you're like me, did you jump in with the original PlayStation? Were you there online day one? For a lot of people, it was the PS2. Some people are new to it with PS4. I remember convincing some friends to buy a PS4. So let me know where you're at. Let me know like where you, your family, your friends were at the time with PlayStation. Some of your favorite games. I didn't get to really touch on a ton of games. I mostly talked about hardware here, but like, let me know. Let me know where you're at. It's a fun conversation. I figured I'd put this out there. So thank you if you listen to me ramble for this long. I really, really do appreciate it. Like the YouTube and comments and the online discourse with games can be brutal right now. So I just wanted to talk about stuff I like, So if you get that, clicking the like button helps. But I'm Jake Baldino. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe because video games, pizza's on me.